All right.
Hey. Hi everyone, welcome to this month's Hangout on Air from the Society for One Place Studies. We are where family history and local history unite, and we combine both family history and local history in studying an individual place. Those of us that are a little bit addicted might even study more than one place. I'm Alex Coles. I'm one of the committee members of the Society, and my one place study is of the village of Wing in Buckinghamshire in England. Now, you might detect from my accent that I am not Buckinghamshire raised. I am from New Zealand, and it is a long way to go from New Zealand to visit my place. I have been lucky enough to do that twice. The first time was in 2005, but that was only for around 2 hours. But in September last year, I was able to visit again and was there for 3 nights. So I got a much better look around. Today we're going to be talking about visiting your place. We'll be covering some ideas of things to do, planning for your visit, and strategies and tips, whether you're a regular visitor to your place or if it's a one-off visit because you're coming from further afield. So I'll switch across to my presentation now, bear with me. Okay, has that come through, Tessa?
It hasn't come through yet, but I think the last time, okay, it's up now.
Lovely. Okay, so here we go, visiting your place. Is it the most exciting day in a one-place studier's life? That might be overstating it, but it certainly is a very exciting time. Your place. You've probably got a ton of reasons yourself why you'd like to visit your place. Some of the key ones that we see are that you'd like to see everything yourself in person and really get a sense of what it's like. While you can see photos, whether they're historic photos or modern photos, or do things like tootle around in Google Street View, having a look at your place, it does actually feel different and look different when you're actually there. So seeing everything in person is a great reason to go visit. You get a sense of the vibe and the energy that's coming from the people that live there. It isn't just a static picture on a screen. There's the that you get to experience. Our ancestors weren't driving around, they were most likely moving around on foot for the most part. So understanding exactly how to move around your place on foot is quite important. Just walking around, working out how they would have got around adds to your understanding of what their lives were like and how the community lived its life. Another reason is to experience the sightlines. So here, the heights of the buildings and the topography of the place will determine what you can see when you're standing in any given spot, how things appear and disappear as you move around, and understanding that as well. You will probably want to take a whole lot of photographs of your place, either to record what's going on, to refer to later, and just because it's nice to have your own photographs use if you're publishing or if you want to put them up on your own website. And I'm sure Tessa would say this is the most important reason to visit your place, is to talk to the residents of that place. So certainly head for anyone with grey or white hair that looks like they might have lived in your place for quite some time. They'll have stories to tell and they'll probably be quite happy to share them with you once they understand why you're interested and why you're there. So talking to the residents in your place is quite important. Okay, now we'll run through some ideas of what to do in your place. Often high on people's list of priorities is that might be there. So you might just have one church, or there might be multiple chapels and things for you to go and look at. So you don't forget to see them all. Usually there's a gravestone. There's a graveyard attached to the major church in your place, and you may want to undertake a gravestone survey. So mapping out where those surviving gravestones are, taking photos of them, transcribing them. You can see in my photo here, this is while the gravestone at All Saints Church in Wing is now closed, was sort of the most recent section of the graveyard there. You want to go in and see what they're like. There's often many internal memorials, so as well as the gravestones outside. You want to be looking for what's inside. They might be in the form of brass memorials. They could be the floor slabs. They could be stained glass windows that were put up. Often your internal memorials will be for the wealthier residents, past residents of your place. And they're always interesting to see. And because they're inside, they're much better preserved than the stones on the outside. So have a good look around. Certainly if you're in the UK, lift up any rugs and see what might be underneath them, because there could be some older stones that they're trying to preserve a little bit, hiding under there. A lot of the churches may have a guidebook available, or postcards, so photos of the church, photos of the place, for sale to raise funds inside. So keep an eye out for anything like that, and you'll probably get one copy of everything or multiple copies of everything, just in case. The staff, the clergy or the church wardens, whoever might be around in those places of worship, just let them know why you're there, what you're up to. They'll probably want to be quite helpful, and that's always nice. They'll point you to possibly to resources that aren't apparent, or be able to help you out in some way with your research or in follow-up correspondence with them. I know one church I visited when obviously we look like foreigners, so we tend to get bailed up everywhere we go if there are church wardens around. And she was lovely, asked why we were there and what we were up to and which family we were looking for, and actually went and checked back in their separate office that afternoon for the particular surname we were interested in, and gave me a call on my mobile to let me know that there weren't any surviving gravestones, so we hadn't missed any while we were out and about. Nice. The very first time I visited Wing, as I said, I only had a couple of hours there, and I decided the first hour would be going around looking at the gravestones and seeing if I could find any ancestors. It was raining that day, so we traipsed around in the rain looking at gravestones, and then went, oh, we should go inside the church. And inside the church was an index to all the gravestones, which would have been a much smarter idea. So I would say go inside first, then do your outside wandering around, because you'll probably get some useful pointers and information that might be helpful to you while you're wandering outside. If you're studying a very new place, there's probably going to be some interesting buildings for you to look at, historic buildings. Most countries have a system of sort of listing or noting historic buildings, and have restrictions around various things you can do with them. For our purposes, we're just happy that they have survived and are maintained. So if you do have any listed buildings in your place, you're going to want to check those out. The picture you can see here, this is actually the vicarage in Wing. If you wander down Vicarage Lane and try and peer down the driveway at that house, you can see virtually nothing. However, if you go onto the church grounds, you can get quite a good shot of the building and see quite a bit more of the building and its grounds and gardens and things. So do wander around and see what different views you can get of those listed buildings or any building that you're interested in. There might be other that were important in terms of the evolution of the community, but aren't listed, don't necessarily have an architectural historical significance, but do have a significance for your one place study. So go and have a look at those. You may find buildings that are marked with plaques or other kind of indications to say that they are significant and why, so that's quite good as well. You might also want to check out the sites of former buildings. If you knew that there was a chapel in a particular place or a building of significance for whatever reason, go and see what's there now. Might be bare land, they might have rebuilt, but sort of understanding where that stood, the physicality of where that stood in relation to everything else can be useful. Okay, the people. As I said before, chatting to residents, always a smart idea. Try and strike up conversations with everyone you see. No, you might try and make contact with some of those people in advance and arrange to meet up with them. But yeah, otherwise, it is a good idea to try and strike up a conversation if you can and see what comes out of it. I know I was walking along the street, camera in hand, obviously attracting attention to myself from residents wondering what I was doing there and why I was taking so many photos. And the lollipop man, is that what you call it in the UK? The guy who helps the school kids get across the road.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yes, sort of stopped and said, hello, what's going on here? So we sort of explained where we were from and why we were interested, and he started telling me about the just the buildings and things that he could see from the corner that we happened to be standing on having this conversation. Was a boy, and the woman who lived in that house was always grumpy and various bits and bobs. There may be other historians that are interested in your place, whether they live there now or whether if they live within travelling distance of the place, you might be able to arrange while you're there. That's always good. See their treasures, hear their stories. I actually had the benefit of meeting with a fellow family historian and resident of Wing while I was there. She invited me round to see her listed building that she happened to live in, and the wonky ceilings, and it was great. I think particularly the US, Tessa, there may be record officers, county officers in your place?
Yes.
Would that be? Yes.
I usually have local and county historical groups, even if they're very small, that have some records, yes.
Right. So there might be something like that you can go and visit, and archivists or librarians that you can talk to and see what they normally have a chance to access unless you went there. Obviously with those kinds of people, it's a good idea to make contact with them in advance so that they know you're coming and particularly what you're interested in, and they've got a chance to help you out. When you're looking out for past people of your place, you'll want to see if there is any signage or anything on any particular buildings. The building that I've got here is the Village Hall of Wing, and you possibly can't read the inscription there, but it is built in memory of Charles Coates in 1905. So watch out for things like that, because you're going to want to get photos of that, just to remind yourself. As I said when I kicked off, you want to walk around as much as possible while you're in your place. Work out where the roads are, where the shortcuts are, because that's what our ancestors would have done. What's the easiest way to get from A cutting across the fields, and sort of figuring those sorts of things. Or you go there, but aren't necessarily apparent if you're just looking on maps or in Google Street View from a distance. A good idea of something to do is to check out the way the census enumerator would have walked around the place. I know in a UK census, on those initial pages before all the detail of everyone who lived there, it does sort of show the route that they took. Roads and key sort of buildings and farms and things, and you might one day take a walk around exactly as they had walked around, and you might actually pick up some interesting snippets of information that solve some questions about the more detailed census information for your place, and help clarify exactly where some of those things were or would have been based on the fact that you've just walked it yourself. Do remember that today is tomorrow's history, so take photos, capture your place as it is now, because in 20 years, 50 years, 100 years time, it could be your photos for your one place study that are important for historians to come. The photo that you can see here, this is one of the allotments in Wing. Photo that will win any beauty prizes. It's a little bit overgrown. They have got some people using this one, but it does still look a little bit scrubby. So as a photo, it's not one I'm going to print out and put on my wall, certainly, but it has captured Wing as it was when I visited, and that's important. Key to the success of your visit will be the preparation that you put into it. Planning. What is it that you want to see? You've probably got a list of what you'd like to see if you're visiting your place. So if you know you've got the opportunity to visit your place coming up, then yeah, definitely do start making a list of key buildings you want to see, of what you want to do while you're there. You'll also want to plan out exactly where in your place those things are. If you're really keen, work out little routes around the town with little sort of subgroups, clusters of what you want. And a key thing is also why you want to visit those things, because what can happen, particularly if it's a one-off visit, it's your big day. You'll have a little scribbled note and you won't remember the significance of why you wanted to go and see that thing, and so then you go, oh, I don't have time, I won't do it. Or there'll be some reason why you can't get there, and then you'll be kicking yourself afterwards. The photo that I have here is the old Union Chapel in the hamlet of Littleworth in Wing. I particularly wanted to go and see that because I know it ceased operating as a chapel some years ago, and it was actually sold last year. And I imagine it's going to be converted to a house in the not too distant future. So for me it was really important to go there, get photos and see it before that happened, and ideally see if I could get inside it, which unfortunately I couldn't. I know there's supposed to be some memorials and plaques inside that to some of the founders of that chapel. I don't know if they're still there, and I'll never know because I've never been able to find photos, sort of modern photos inside that chapel. But know that chances are, if I'll go there 5 years from now, this bit's, and it may not even be there. So yeah, definitely note down why you want to go and see what it is you want to see, so that you've got all the information to hand. Your list has probably gotten a bit long by this point, so you possibly have to do some prioritization as to what you want to see. And that might be prioritizing it based on the current projects that you're working on for your one place study. So if you are working along with our World War I project that's assigned at the moment, there could be particular memorials or places or sites of events within your place that it's important for you to go and see this particular year. Or you could be working on a project on the agricultural history of your place, so actually going out and trying to see the farms and the farmhouses might be more important. So yeah, we'll work out what are the must-sees, and what's possibly not so important, or that you could do at a different time potentially. And lastly, in your preparation, you definitely want to publicise your visit. Let people know you're going. If it's a one-off visit, so like in my circumstances, it's one-off visit coming from afar, you know, let people know some months in advance, because you know some months in advance that it's coming up and what those dates are that you're going to be around. And then you've got the chance that people will hear about it and have the opportunity to get in contact with you, maybe suggest meeting up, or ways to help you, offers of assistance. So if you've got a blog about it, all over social media, share your excitement with the world, and maybe you'll even get the opportunity to meet some of those people that are excited back that you are coming. During the visit itself, you've got a good plan, follow the plan. Or abandon the plan completely. No, follow. try and follow the plan. You've made the plan. So yeah, take the plan with you. But you will have to be adaptable while you're there. So the weather might not cooperate. You might get a day where it's a horrible wet or stormy day, or it's just murky and it's making your photographs look all sad and miserable. Or there might be other conditions that what you're able to do. And you can see in this photo here off to the right hand side, there was a fair bit of roadworks around on the days that I was visiting, so I couldn't walk on all the footpaths. Some bits had to cross the other side of the road, things like that. Ties in with our other note, bring a helper. It's really helpful if you've got someone to make sure you don't get run over while you're taking photos. Highly recommend that. But yeah, there could be parts of your place that are not accessible for whatever reason, or you just can't do what to do because it's too muddy to traipse across the fields, or for whatever reason. So you do need to be adaptable. Leave plenty of spare time if you can. Obviously, you want to spend as much time as possible in your place, so hopefully you've got spare time just to meander about. Plenty of spare time to chat with residents in your place, so that you've still got time to do everything that you hope to achieve, but you've also got extra time to really sit back and absorb what it's like to be in your place and appreciate that experience. Highly recommend bringing a helper. If your helper's one that's keen on family history or local history, so much the better. But yeah, just someone who can maybe help carry your things or make notes for you. Make sure you don't get run over. Point out things that you might have missed while you're buzzing around, all excited, trying to see everything and do everything and talk to everyone. I walked onto the grounds of All Saints Church, and I was quite excited. I said, "Hello, all my dead friends." My mother looked at me a bit strange at that. Someone who understands those kind of impulses is nice. Thankfully, there wasn't anyone else there to hear my outburst. She was like, okay. Well, yeah, they do make plenty of notes as well. I found I was relying on photographs quite a lot, taking a lot of photos and thinking that would be my memory for me. But I think I should have taken a few more notes, jotted some things down while I was walking about, and that paired up with the photographs would have been a better way to do it. But as it happened on the days I was just too excited to do anything like that. It was just far too practical. So watch out for that impulse. Okay, some of you might live quite a bit closer to your place, so you're able to visit there more than once or semi-regularly. If you are able to visit semi-regularly. Go at different times of the year. There's a few reasons for this. As well as the sort of vibe and feel of the place being quite different, the visibility will also be different because the trees, and so sometimes a year are better than others for certain things. If you have a graveyard and it's quite overgrown, winter is the time to go. And yeah, winter's good if you've got houses that are otherwise hidden. You might not be able to see in summer, so they might look prettier in summer because there's lots of trees around, but you can't really get a good clear look at them. So go at different times of year. If you've got historic buildings that are open to the public, check out what those opening dates are because they're likely not open the whole year round. And you've got the opportunity to go back when they are open and have a look. And watch out for any local events going on in your place. So they might have an annual or sports events, things like that, going on that you want to check out. And some of those might have had quite a history within that place. So go on those days. Also go at different times of the day. The lighting and the vibe and the feel of the place will be different at different times of the day. So because I was staying overnight in my place, that meant I was able to walk up and down sort of the rural roads quite early in the morning and sort of see the commuter traffic, things like that. And that's something that you wouldn't see if you were just going sort of in the middle of the day. And I'll go through some examples of photos now. So the light does make a big difference to your photos. So the first day I visited All Saints on the left. It was a boring, overcast day. So I got a photo that looks a little boring. It's quite good because you can see everything in it because the lighting is more even. But it's certainly not as dramatic as the lighting was on day 2 when the sun was actually shining. And therefore you get sunshine and shadows and photos. So it's good to have a mix of both of those sorts of things. Photos that show whatever you want to illustrate quite clearly and some photos that look pretty if you want to put them on your website. So that's just different on 2 different days, and the lighting will be quite different at different times of the year as well. Okay, following on from that, here on the left-hand side, I've got a photo of one of the gravestones that was taken on that second day. And you can see, although that contrast looks great in the main shot, if I've got a gravestone that's partially in shadow, that is not going to read and transition on that. It just makes it a whole lot harder. There's a little bit you can do in Photoshop. So over on the right-hand side, I've messed around with the contrast there, which makes the parts that are in shadow much easier to read. I still can't read all of it though, and so being here on a different day with different lighting conditions would have enabled me to get a shot of this gravestone, which actually shows the inscriptions on it more clearly. Different times of the day will impact, particularly if it is an inscription type gravestone as well, because you want to ideally get a little shadow into those inscriptions, which highlights those letters a bit more. And depending on the way the lighting is working, it might be quite flat and you won't see that. Okay, a fun thing to do if you can get there regularly are then and now shots. So you can see here I have a modern day photo looking down Church Street in Wing, an old postcard looking down Church Street in Wing. it's really obvious to me that I've taken this not from the same spot at all as the postcard. If I'd had the postcard there, I would have been able to sort of line up, deliberately trying to do this sort of then and now photo. I could make sure I was in the exact same spot, looking at the exact same angles and places, and try and sort of replicate where that old postcard photographer stood in my modern day shot, and then I'd have those two photos to compare or merge into each other in some way that tells a story. You really do need to have the actual photo or postcard, the old photo or postcard there in order to be able to do that, though. I was thinking, oh, it would be enough to have those on my iPad, and I'll just whip out my iPad and fire it up, and I'd have it there. But of course, in the rush, in the excitement of being there, you don't tend to do that. If you're visiting more regularly, you would go with that in mind, and you would be more focused on it. But certainly for me, it didn't quite happen, didn't play out as I wanted it, and this one was just a coincidence. I happened to have one in sort of the same street. It's sort of the same. If you're there regularly, you can also make notes about today's change. If you live there, then you could do a photo a day. So it's a photo at the same time every day or once a day, but taken in the same spot. And that will show the seasonality in your place over time. And if you happen to pick a spot where there is construction or deconstruction going on, or people going past, that's going to be quite interesting and tell a tale over time to be able to record that. If you're not a visual person, you might want to keep a diary of that sort of thing as well, and just keep track of today's changes in your place. Okay, if you're not so lucky to be able to visit all the time and you've only got a single visit, or effectively a single visit, obviously prioritization does become quite a bit more important. You really need to know, really going to cry about if you do miss out on the day, and what things are nice to have. You need to be even more prepared than you otherwise would, because you might not get a second shot at this. I decided to take a lot of annotated maps with me. So I did these a few different ways. On the right hand side there you can see a Google map where I had actually added marking out where key buildings were, although I knew that they weren't necessarily there where approximately where I thought buildings were. So some of these are not quite in the right place, or there's no evidence then or now to say specifically where it was, but it's just like, oh, I know there was a chapel somewhere along here. Let's see if I can find any sign of it while I'm actually there. I also purchased the Ordnance Survey app for my iPad and had purchased the maps that covered the wing area. Grabbed screenshots of those and then had physical printed copies on which I'd scribbled notes and things to myself. So I intended to go at it a whole lot of different ways, not end up referring to those maps at all while I was there, and I should have. Just really in the excitement and panic of it all, and seeing things like, oh wow, and you just tend to meander around. I meandered a bit too much and focused on some key things, and then therefore omitted a whole lot. I just realised one of the roads you can see on there, which is a little one, Prospect Place, heading off to the right of High Street, did not go down that road at all. So this is a road which isn't a through road, which will be why I didn't go down it at all. It is a dead end. But yeah, I've been to Wing twice and have not been down this road, which is right in the middle of Wing. It seems incredible to me now that happened. It's like, oh, so I'll have to rely on Google Street View to know what it's like. Accommodation, if you're coming from somewhere, if you're really lucky, you'll find that there's a B&B or other types of accommodation in your place or near to your place. I was lucky enough, I was able to stay in a B&B in the hamlet of Burkett in Wing, which meant I was walking distance. I could get up in the morning and go for a walk before breakfast up and down the roads, and took about 20 minutes to walk from there down to All Saints Church in the main part of Wing. And so I highly recommend staying in your place if you absolutely can, because then you do have the benefit of being there at different times of day and easily accessible. And lastly, do your follow-up work as soon as possible. So at the time you're taking all these photos, you're making notes, you're thinking it's all going to make sense to you, and then time goes by and it's several months later and some of that information is lost, swirling around in your brain. And yes, just sit down and try and match things up, maybe map out the photos onto a map so that you remember precisely where that building was. The sooner you get on and do things like that, the more benefit you're going to get from having been in your place. Lastly, I've just got a few extra photography tips for you. Be sure that you know your camera and the settings are correct before you show up. So metadata refers to the information that your camera is capturing onto every photo that you take. So it's information about your camera, information about the settings you used when you took your photo, and things like the date and time, which is probably pretty crucial for you to have that record lodged into the digital memory of your photo, the day that you took that and the time. So make sure the settings are right, particularly if you've changed time zones to get to your place. Try and take the photos at the maximum resolution, so as large a photo as you can, to get the maximum bang for your buck out of your photo. But offsetting that, of course, is the storage available to you and the number of photos you're going to be able to take. So make sure work out in advance, how many photos you like to be able to take based on the cards or whatever it is for your digital camera. You may want to have a standalone drive to back up those photos onto so that you can clear your memory cards and start again. While I was in Wing, I took 735 photos, and of those were in the couple of hours that I spent taking photos of gravestones, and I stopped because I ran out of space and couldn't take any more. I was also quite tired by that point, but really it was because I would have forced myself to keep going if I hadn't run out of space and had to stop and go back. So make sure that you have got enough space to capture everything you want to capture at the time. Signs. A good tip is to take a photo, make sure you get a photo of place signs for your place. You're going to want those. And street signs or other signs, it's good to get a photo of those just for their own sake. And also if you're wondering, if your place has a number of streets and areas and you're wandering around, sometimes it can be difficult to know where you took a particular photo. But if you've taken a photo of the street sign before you go down that street, and you've done that consistently as you've moved around taking your photos, you're going to know where that photo was. Yeah. Okay, accept that there will be modern intrusions into your photos. They're not really intrusions if you think about it from the point of view that you are there to capture tomorrow's history. Nonetheless, it can be annoying to go, why won't that car get out of my photo? Why are those rubbish bins lining the road? Really? You're not going to be able to avoid that, so just try and accept that early on. Yeah, it's all part of capturing the place as it is now. I like to think that 50 years from now, people might primitive that was. They had to put their rubbish out in bins on the side of the road. They would have come up with a better system. And take a variety of different shots. So So take both wide angles and close-ups. So a wide angle is where you're getting quite a lot into your photo. So on the left-hand side here, you can see I've taken the block of houses, and you may be able to spot sort of very in the middle of that, high up on the wall, naming that terrace, and that was Albert Terrace that was constructed in 1883. So take your wide angle shot, but also take your close-ups so that you can see little individual details that might be relevant to you in future, to know that that block was constructed in 1883 and what the name of it was, so that if you see that pop up as an address in census records and the like, that's quite important. So try and get both of those. I like to try and get the wide angle shots, then the close-ups, because then you know where the close-ups came from. Get a wide depth of field, so try and get as much of the photograph in focus as possible. So here we can see there's a nice building. You might be able to, here if you can see my mouse come through on screen, there is an old pump there and there's a plaque for that pump. I don't know in future if I'm going to be interested in the pump or if I'm going to be interested in the building. So if the whole lot is in focus, I'm able to zoom in and have a look. Could also be I'm interested in sort of buildings further in the distance. So if those are also in focus, I've got more chance of being able to zoom in and get something of benefit out of the photo. So having wide depth of field rather than quite a shallow depth of field where only a small amount is in focus is going to be useful in the long term. And lastly, chimping. So chimping, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, is the fine art of taking a photo and then immediately wanting to look at it on your digital screen. If there are people in it, those people usually want to admire themselves, things like that. Good insofar as everything on a small screen. The photo may be out of focus and you might not be able to tell that by looking on the small screen. So if you are going to do that, make sure that you've run some experiments and know how far you need to zoom in if you're going to look at it on the little screen to make sure that everything is in focus. Okay, I'll just switch back and I'm back, I think. Can you see me and hear me now, Tessa?
I need to unmute myself. Yeah, I can see you. I think those are some great tips. I was making notes for myself. And just a couple of comments that I would make with it is I really did take advantage. I think it's a very good idea, and I think we tend to forget it, to really get the word out that you're going to be there. If there's a Facebook group, for your community, if there's, if people are on Google Plus or Twitter or whatever it is, really get the word out, because I had a number of people, want to connect with me then. If you're going to be here this day, this is when we're going to be here. We have some photos or we have X or we can take you around. And so most people are pretty good if you can give them a wide number of days to work with, and then you can kind of adjust your schedule as needed. I think that's an excellent idea. One other thing I would suggest, my place is very small, Plate Cove East, but I was able, when I was in St. John's, to go to the archives or go to the university and get a lot of information that they had about Plate Cove. So Plate Cove doesn't have a library or an archives or a local genealogy group. It has about 20 homes, a church, and a petrol station. And a school, but you could get that information at the next largest town in Kings Cove, and you could also get it in St. John's because they'd gathered all of that type of information. So some of your work is going to need to be done in other places, especially if you're like me, and I know you had the situation, we don't live anywhere near our place, so we couldn't normally get to an archives there. So that was something that was pretty useful. And then the other thing I would say is it was really helpful to dress appropriately. You know, if you're going to be wandering around in the cemetery, or, you know, it was summertime when I went, and I, you know, at first I was thinking shorts or whatever because it was so warm, and I thought, you know, there was, you know, branches, and, you know, you were crawling around everywhere, and it wasn't like, you know, wear your sandals or something. It was, you know, definitely have your hiking boots on, you know, you're going to be doing a little work. So on some of these kinds of things, you have to think, bring a variety of things or bring appropriate things. When I was at the archives or when I was at the churches, you know, you couldn't just traipse in there in a sundress, you know, you at least had to have your sweater with you or something like that. So very helpful.
Yeah.
Someone has a call. Okay.
Yeah. Generally, you are doing a lot of walking, so yeah, good walking shoes, highly recommended.
And I would also agree with the comment you made, and I had a real situation happen. Know your technology that you take with you, whether that's your mobile phone. You know, most phones now have cameras as well as video recorders on them. Know how to use it in advance so you're not trying to figure that out online. You know, make recordings, you know, just kind of stream the whole area first, you know, and talk about it a little bit, or what street you're on, or where you're standing, so that you have that short 2-minute video, and then go into the church or the building or the cemetery or whatever it is. My camera, I'd been in St. John's for a week and everything was great. I got to my place and I took one picture, and then my camera just died for some unknown reason. I about had heart failure. So thankfully there was a larger town nearby, and I, you know, at that point I bought a camera, you know, kind of thing, because you just needed to have it. Because I was in Canada, it just would not work. We couldn't figure out how to fix it. And it was a good investment, you know, because it had been 5 years since my last camera or whatever. But it's those kinds of things that you kind of have to be prepared and have a plan B or plan C. But I knew that somebody said, well, just don't take pictures. And I thought, well, the chances of me getting back to Plate Cove are slim to none. So I need photos, and it's worth it.
Mobile technology might fail you. I know, because I live in a city, I assumed, well, of course I'd be able to get a decent, you know, 3G mobile data connection in Wing, so I'd be able to go onto Google Maps and pull up my Google Maps on my iPad, and yeah, that didn't quite pan out at all. So I was restricted to those things that I had printed out.
And so it's good when you're mentioning that, it's good that you've put it all together in some way, but then you almost need to have that backup plan, that you also have a little bit of it on paper, just to make sure that you're covered. And I definitely agree with you on having enough storage space, or now you might be able to, depending on your connection, you know, put it up in the cloud, you know, what you've done. But you definitely have to make sure you've backed up your photos, because the chances of something going wrong, it's always going to happen on that one-off trip. Exactly. You're right.
Yeah.
I love your idea about the enumerator route for censuses. That's something I hadn't thought of. I'm making notes for my next trip now.
It's something I didn't do, but wish I had done.
Okay, so, great. And definitely want to include Peg, you're here today, as well as Julie. I know that Julie recently was acting the tourist when she had family come from Australia to the UK and went to your place. Isn't that right? So any thoughts that you have that you want to add to this discussion?
I did no preparation at all for this.
You need to unmute yourself. Oh, great.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. I didn't do any preparation for this latest visit to Putnam. And what was interesting was walking along with my cousin and his wife, and just observing them looking at what they were looking at, whether it was headstones or things in the church. It was just, they were able to make it look at a very different level. And I mean, even as we were driving around, all we could hear in the back of the car was lots of oohs and ahs and comments about how old things were, things that when you live here you don't realise or you just take for granted. And we were in Putnam Cemetery, and my cousin's wife spotted a grave, and it was the early 1700s, which of course is older than Australia. And that, I think, just blew them away. They were just so amazed by that. And so we looked at things. So we went initially to Womburgh, which is not exactly my place, but almost my place. It's where my grandfather was christened. We stood at the font where my cousin's father was christened, and we walked around and we explored the village, we explored the church through the churchyard, then went across to Putnam, which is about 2 miles, and did the same there. And it was just lovely, actually, just to go back to basics and just look at it through the eyes of a complacent. You don't go very often to see that place. You become complacent. You know where something is. So to actually go in with somebody who's never been there before, they point out things to you that perhaps you've never even noticed. For example, around Putnam on the church, done some renovation work, and they'd marked the wall with 2006. Now, I've been there since 2006, but I'd never noticed that. And they've marked it in the cement because further down there was some piece of work done that was out 1836, and that's been marked. So they've followed the pattern that was done in a previous time, which I thought was lovely. But I hadn't noticed that, and I've walked that church. In the church, I spent hours in there, and I'd never seen any of that because I was too blinkered. The other thing I always do is I always put a note in the visitor's book. Over the last 25 years, I've probably written about a dozen little notes in the visitor's book, and I always put a note in there. I always leave my email address, and I always make a little note as to why I'm there. So for Putnam, I descend from a family called the Budd family, who have been in Putnam since 1724. And if you're researching my branch of the family, you will invariably get back to Henry Budd, who was in some early architecting. And I always leave a little note. And over time, I have had people, at previous times I used to say phone numbers, then we got email, so now I leave an email address. I've not had an email as yet, but maybe I will in the coming weeks and months. But it's lovely just to be able to go back. Whilst my family member was here, we went up to Northamptonshire en route to Scotland to see where his grandfather came from, which is a parish called Dodford in Northamptonshire. And we parked at the church and walked around the church, walked around the churchyard. We spoke to the florist, we chatted to her, she pointed in the direction of somebody else, and we spoke to a lady who was randomly taking pictures of a house that was being demolished. And she had pinned up, they'd taken the phone box out of the village, but they've left the physical box there, they just removed the phone. And she's converted the phone box with old pictures in it. And we were able to talk to her. She took me to see somebody else who knew somebody else who had lived in who didn't know my great uncle was my cousin's grandfather, but who knew the name, and it's quite an unusual name, but it's very common in that area. So it was lovely, almost researching, even if you've been researching a long time, to go back to basics. So that's my little tale of my recent visits.
Lovely. Peg, do you have any stories or tips to share with us?
Oh, no, it was very good. It's been a long time since I've been over to England, so part of the reason I'm here is to kind of refresh my memory of what you're supposed to do an on-site visit and prepare for one hopefully next year.
Oh, wonderful.
When I've gone in the past, it hasn't been for genealogy purposes. I've been taking groups to London theatre tours or something like that because I'm a meeting planner by trade, and then I would slip off for a half of a day and try to go do something in a rush, and that's not the way to do it. So I plan to just spend a month and come and have a wonderful time.
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah, definitely. With a month, you're going to have much more of a schedule to work with. That's great.
Yes, I'm excited. I do some stateside research. Try to cram it in when my husband goes to conferences or something. So one of the lines that I work on is actually a Slovakian line that came into Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then to New Jersey. So last fall I went with him for a week, and he went to his conference, and I planned an on-site visit. And I think it would have been much more productive had I listened to his presentations first.
Oh, that's good to know.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right. I don't think we have any questions from the viewers who are watching, and they know, I believe, you can comment in our event page if you have a question. Otherwise, Alex, if you want to go ahead and finish up with any few little extra tips, or just finish up the discussion.
Oh, a big tip, remember to have fun. You're there to experience the place. So do whatever you have to do to relax and experience the place.
Excellent.
So yeah, it is a good time to conclude. So thanks to Tessa for running the session today, and for Julie and Peg for coming along and hanging out with me. Thanks to all of you for watching. Remember, you can re-watch this on our YouTube channel at any time if you missed anything. These Hangouts are monthly. So join us next month. The next session is on 22nd of August, and we'll be talking about school days. See you then.
Thank you.
Thanks.